What should businesses, employers be doing right now to start planning for potentially bringing people back?
I think the most important thing for employers is to appreciate the extent and scale of the disruption that the last few weeks would have had on their workforce. And I think what's interesting about the timing where we are now is we're probably, as you say, it's been anywhere between 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the kind of organisation. And what we're starting to see across the organisations that we work with is that the feedback is that their workforces, their staff, have probably adjusted to this new normal. They've adjusted to their working patterns where they are working from home. Maybe they're not as productive in the majority of instances. They'd probably be at somewhere between 70 to 80% of productivity. They might be doing work in their pajamas. They might be watching a little bit of Netflix. They might be having a drink throughout the day. And for all of the initial shock to the system in terms of making that initial adjustment, that's probably starting to become an adjusted way and the new normal in terms of how people are working. And what people are now facing is the prospect that in a few weeks, and it could be sooner, as you say, it could be longer, they have to resume the old normal. They have to get back into their routine of the public transport, or the getting ready for work, the showering, the shaving, all of the things that people have to do. And there is a little bit of apprehension and anxiety for people in terms of that. Of course, the other things that have happened is that over the last few weeks, there's been so much uncertainty on the health side, on the economic side. Businesses are probably communicating considerably less with their people about where things are at within their own businesses. So the combination of all of those things means that apprehension and anxiety is actually going to escalate probably for a lot of people in the lead up to, well, when are things going to go back to normal, and what does normal mean in the future?
Yep. And as employers, we've got to be pretty clear on that, because you then layer over for your workforce who have children that they're being told to work at home if they can, when they can. They're being told their kids have to learn from home as well. And basically you can't do both. So for a lot of your workforce, the novelty of working from home has certainly worn off, as they're thinking, how do I juggle being a homeschooler with a home-based employee at the same time and do both and be expected to do both?
Exactly, and employers have got to be very mindful of what this actually translates into in practice. And I think a lot of employers, to their great credit, will have been very supportive of those circumstances. But there comes a point for every business and every organisation, a lot of whom have been doing it tough and will continue to do it tough for quite some time ahead, where they will say, well, at some point we need our employees to be working full throttle, if not at any time more so than probably the present or the immediate future. The extent of that support that employers may have been able to provide up to now, I think is going to dissipate over a period of time. And that's going to lead to some interesting situations of conflict, of feelings of being unsupported, unappreciated from the workforce. Employers need to be communicating a lot better than what a lot of them are doing at the moment. And yes, a lot of it is a moving feast. The school example, Koshi, I think is a great one, because messages around students potentially going back one day a week, or some of the other things that I've heard, are not going to give employees a huge amount of comfort in terms of their immediate planning.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of employers have a work from home policy, which you should have. And work from home policies remind employees that the working day is from 9 till 5:30, that they've got to be online right from 9 o'clock and be available on Slack or any of the other internal communications groups. That if you've got kids at home, say on school holidays, well, then you should take leave or take leave without pay if you've got no leave left over, because you can't do both. Now, a lot of employers have been very conciliatory with that for 4 weeks, but if it goes on another 8 weeks, well then how do you start reinforcing that policy that you've been pretty flexible on?
Exactly, and I think employers who have been good enough to go over and above with not just leave, but perhaps even reducing the expectations that they have in terms of output from people, if they're going to change their mind, they need to be telegraphing that. I think the worst thing that employers can be doing is just waking up on a Monday morning and saying, right, from now on, all of that is in the past, and we're now expecting everyone to go back to what they were doing at the beginning of March. The more notice employees are given about any kind of change, it's always going to facilitate those employees being able to adjust to that change better, and it just makes for an easier sell for the employers, who are well within their rights, mind you, to say we've got a business to run, we have expectations of our people, and we need people to be doing their job.
Yep.
Joydeep, just before we let you go, just on that point, any sort of, I guess, legalities around any of this that employers should be looking out for?
Well, the legal landscape around all of this is changing at a rate of knots. The JobKeeper scheme that was announced a few weeks ago is extremely detailed, extremely complicated. Employers need to understand whether they qualify, which employees may or may not qualify. A lot is changing. Certainly when it comes to things like stand downs, directions to take leave, directions to vary people's contracts. Not a huge amount has necessarily changed, other than to enable employers to be able to do things a little bit more freely, particularly if they qualify for JobKeeper support. But there's a lot of technical detail in a lot of these schemes. I think a danger for employers is they might be aware of some of the high level things, might be making assumptions about applicability. Always advisable to get specific advice in these circumstances.
Absolutely. And if the government says each of the state governments, we're going to stage 2 lockdowns, from 3 down to 2, everyone back to work. If you can go to work, you should be going to work. Do employers follow that timetable set by the government themselves, or do they give a bit of grace period to say, right, the government is saying lockdown is going to be reduced to level 2 on Monday. Hey, let's start every other day for the first week. You come in so you can get your family situation sorted.
I think employers first and foremost will need to consider, if they are going to have people coming back, what are those people going to be doing? And if we assume that all employers' businesses are unaffected, and that on the day that the government is saying that people should be coming back, their businesses are operating at the level and speed that they were prior to all of this, then that's great. But for a lot of businesses, that's just simply not going to be the case. They have to think through, permission to have people coming back to work is one thing, but what are those people actually going to be doing? In many instances, it may be better for a lot of people to continue to stay at home, not just in terms of their personal circumstances, but just to avoid a message being sent or interpreted by employees that I've come back to work, there's actually nothing to do, my employer is in dire straits, and all of a sudden I have a whole additional set of anxieties that I need to work through. So employers have got some big decisions to make. The permission, the government edicts are one thing, but their own assessment of what their needs and capacity are going to be is far more important.